Audio Jungle.
Observatory X, the Anomaly. This time, we're focusing on chapters 3, picking up right where we left off. Still at that remote observatory in Ladakh, still with that ominous silence, and of course more of those strange symbols that just keep appearing.
Yeah, the setting is really something, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like the observatory is a character itself.
I know, right? It's so isolated and cut off.
Exactly. That feeling of isolation the author creates is, well, it's palpable. It's like the observatory is totally cut off from the rest of the world. And that really adds to the tension, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And speaking of tension, we're introduced to a new character in Chapter 3, Dr. Kalen Orson. He's a scientist who's just arrived at the observatory, and let me tell you, he's walking right into the thick of it.
He seems like a fish out of water a little bit, don't you think?
Definitely. Especially with the whole mystery surrounding the disappearance of that other scientist, Dr. Curran.
Oh, yeah, the missing scientist. That's
Yeah.
always a good hook in a mystery.
For sure. But the author does a clever thing here. They have Dr. Curran leave behind this super cryptic note.
Oh, yeah, what was it again? Something like, he can breathe, he can sense, he is...
That's it. And that unfinished thought is just killing me. It's like the author is dangling a carrot in front of us.
It makes you want to keep reading to find out what he was going to say.
Exactly. And then there's Arya, the research assistant. She seems to know a lot more than she's letting on.
Yeah, she's definitely holding back some serious information.
Right. And she gives Dr. Orson this cryptic warning about the observatory, like she's trying to tell him to get out while he still can.
Almost like she knows something terrible is going to happen.
Exactly. But then she has this terrifying encounter with a shadow entity.
Oh my gosh, that part was creepy. The one that mimics her appearance.
Yeah, that one. I mean, what was that all about? Is it a hallucination? A supernatural being?
Right.
Or something else entirely?
It's like the author is playing with our perception of reality.
Totally. And those blinking lights she sees in the sky, what's up with that?
It's like the author is slowly layering on these unexplained events, and each one is a bit more unsettling than the last.
Right. And the fact that the cameras don't pick up on any of it just adds to the mystery.
It makes you question what's real and what's not.
Okay, but it gets even weirder. You won't believe this, but that same symbol that was found earlier, the one in the dining area.
And on Dr. Karen's note.
Yep, that one. Well, it suddenly appears on Arya's wrist.
Oh, wow. So it's like the symbol is spreading or something.
Right, and there's this strange buzzing sound, almost like the symbol is, I don't know, branding her or something.
It's a powerful image for sure. So now we're left wondering, is Arya a target?
Ooh, good question. Or is she somehow connected to whatever is causing these events? This whole thing is like a giant puzzle box.
With each chapter revealing a new and unsettling piece.
I can't wait to try and put those pieces together with you. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's take a closer look at some of the characters, especially Dr. Orson. He's got this very scientific, rational way of looking at the world.
But the events at the observatory are definitely challenging his worldview.
Yeah, you can tell he's starting to realize that logic and reason may not be enough to explain what's going on. It's like he's being forced to confront the unknown.
And that's something that's way outside his comfort zone.
Exactly. And that conflict between what we know and what we don't know is a major theme here, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. The author is constantly playing with our expectations, making us question what we believe is possible.
I'm totally seeing that. So we have this rational scientist facing the inexplicable. But where does Arya fit into all of this?
Well, I think she represents a different way of knowing. One that's more intuitive, maybe even spiritual. It's like she has a deeper understanding of what's happening at the observatory, even if she can't quite explain it.
So she's like a bridge between the world of science and the world of, well, the supernatural.
Precisely. And that tension between those two worlds, that's what makes this story so compelling. It's making us consider that maybe, just maybe, there are things out there that we can't explain with science.
I mean, it definitely makes you think.
Right.
And these chapters are just full of intrigue and suspense. I'm hooked. But before we move on, I want to hear from you. What stood out to you the most in these chapters? What questions are you left pondering? Think about it for a bit, because we'll be exploring those very questions when we come back for part 2 of our deep dive into Observatory X.
Yeah, it's interesting how the author uses Dr. Orson's scientific background to make the mystery even more mysterious.
What do you mean?
Well, he's always trying to come up with a logical explanation for what's going on.
Right, because he's a scientist.
Exactly. But all the evidence seems to point to something beyond science, something unexplainable.
Like when he tries to say that the shadow entity is just a trick of the light.
Yeah, but you can tell that deep down he doesn't really believe that.
Totally. That inner conflict he's got going on, it makes him such a relatable character.
I agree. He's struggling to understand what he's seeing, to reconcile it with his beliefs, and we're right there with him, questioning everything.
It really makes you think about the limits of what we know, you know.
For sure. Like, what happens when we run into something that just doesn't make sense? Do we stick with logic? Or do we have to open our minds to something bigger, something we don't understand?
Ooh, that's a good question. So we've got this tension between science and the supernatural. But what about the people? Dr. Orson, Arya, Dr. Satyapan.
Oh yeah, the human element is important too.
They're all caught up in this web of weirdness. What are their motivations? What are they hiding?
Well, that's where the psychological thriller aspect comes in. The author is really good at using their backstories and relationships to add more layers to the mystery.
Okay, I see that.
Yeah.
Like Dr. Satyatan, we know he had some issues with the missing scientist, Dr. Karan.
Right. So could he be involved somehow in Dr. Karen's disappearance?
That's what I'm thinking. He's definitely acting suspicious. And his interactions with Arya are really interesting.
You pick up on that too.
Yeah, like they have some kind of history together, something we don't know about yet.
It's like the author is giving us these little hints, these clues, and we have to figure out what they mean.
I'm loving it. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. But honestly, I'm starting to get a little worried about Arya. I mean, she's got that symbol on her now. And those visions she's having.
It seems like she's in real danger.
Right. It's like a ticking time bomb.
And speaking of time bombs, what about that note Dr. Curran left behind, that unfinished sentence?
He can breathe. He can sense. It's just stuck in my head.
Yeah, who is he talking about? Or what?
That's the million-dollar question. And the way the author writes it, it doesn't seem like it's just another person.
Yeah, that he could be misdirection.
Whoa. You think it could be something else, something not human.
Maybe. Something ancient, something powerful.
That would explain a lot, like why everything feels so big, so out of control.
Right, like there are forces at work that are bigger than any of us. And if that's true, then the observatory is more than just a place to look at the stars.
It's like a doorway.
Exactly, maybe a portal for something ancient and dangerous to come through.
Okay, now getting chills. This is going way beyond a normal mystery. It's like a mix of sci-fi, horror, and suspense all rolled into one.
And the author is nailing it. They're playing with our expectations and keeping us totally engaged.
Absolutely. But I want to pause for a second and appreciate how they use language to create this spooky atmosphere. The way they describe the observatory, the silence, the flickering lights.
Oh, yeah. It makes it so real.
It's like we're right there with the characters, feeling their fear.
The author isn't just telling a story. They're creating an experience.
Exactly. It's like we're on this crazy roller coaster ride through the unknown, and the author's in control. They decide when we go up, when we go down, when we twist and turn.
And we're strapped in, loving every minute of it.
Okay, so I'm ready for the next twist. But before we dive into the last part, I want you to imagine, if you were Dr. Orson or Arya, what would you do?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Would you try to fight the unknown? Or would you try to understand it? Keep that in mind, because next time we'll be talking about the climax of this story and exploring how it all might end. Okay, so we're back, ready to finish our deep dive into Observatory X. Chapters 3 have been pretty wild, right?
Definitely wild. I mean, we've got everything. Unsettling symbols, a missing scientist, that shadow entity.
And don't forget those cryptic messages.
Yeah.
It's like the author is throwing everything at us just to keep us guessing.
And it's working, at least for me.
Oh yeah, me too. I still have no idea what's really going on at that observatory. Is it science? Is it paranormal? Something else entirely.
Right. It's like the author is blurring the lines between what we know and what we don't know on purpose.
Which is kind of brilliant when you think about it. It keeps us on the edge of our seats.
Totally. And as we get closer to the climax of these chapters, I think we're heading towards a big confrontation.
A confrontation.
Yeah, like all the threads of the story, the characters, the setting, the symbols, everything is coming together. You can feel the anticipation building.
Oh, I definitely feel it. But, it's interesting how the author uses those subtle cues to foreshadow danger.
Like what?
Well, like the recurring symbol.
Oh, yeah, and that ominous buzzing sound.
Exactly. It's like a storm is brewing. You can feel the energy in the air.
And speaking of that symbol, what do you make of it? I mean, it's obviously more than just a random marking.
Yeah, it feels like some kind of conduit, a link between our world and something else. But what is that something else?
Right. And why does it keep showing up in different places. On the walls, in Dr. Kern's note, and now on Arya's wrist.
It's almost as if the symbol itself is a character in the story.
A silent observer,
Yeah.
watching everything that unfolds.
Exactly. And it feels like its presence is getting stronger, more threatening.
Agreed. It's not just a passive thing anymore. It's an active force. Something is happening, and the characters are caught right in the middle of it.
Okay, so we've got this creepy symbol, a missing scientist, a group of people who are hiding things. What's going to happen next? What do you think the climax will be like?
Well, based on how the story's been going, I think we're going to see a showdown. The characters will have to face the truth about the observatory and whatever is behind all of this.
Ooh, I like that. A showdown. Can't wait to see how it plays out. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the author challenging our assumptions about the world.
Right, right.
Do you really think there's a deeper message here? Something beyond just telling a good story?
I do. I think the author is trying to make us think about what we believe, about the possibility of things that we don't understand, things that can't be explained by science. And in a world that feels so uncertain right now, that message is more important than ever.
Wow, yeah. It's like a reminder that there's still so much out there that we don't know.
Exactly. And that's what makes this story so exciting. It's a celebration of mystery, of the unknown.
It's a reminder that there are still things in the world that can surprise us, that can make us question everything we thought we knew. And that's what makes Observatory X so compelling. It's a story that stays with you long after you finish reading it. So to everyone listening, as you keep reading, pay attention to the details, the symbols, the characters, everything. Keep an open mind and let the story take you where it wants to go. You might be surprised by what you discover. And with that, we come to the end of our deep dive into Observatory X, The Anomaly, Chapters 3. But the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep an open mind. The truth, as they say, is out there.